If you follow the evening news or social media, the narrative is relentless. Danger is lurking around every corner, strangers are the primary threat, and crime rates are climbing higher every day. Look at this graph tracking crime in the United States since 1990. The line showing actual, reported serious crime drops significantly over the last 3 decades. Meanwhile, the line tracking public fear goes in the exact opposite direction. Every year, a massive majority of Americans tell pollsters that crime is up, even when the numbers show it's down. This happens because our brains fall victim to the availability heuristic. When dramatic, violent events are covered relentlessly by the media, they become incredibly easy to recall. And if an event is easy to remember, we automatically assume it happens all the time. Relying on these collective vibes leads to massive shifts in policing budgets and sentencing laws based on an illusion. These decisions alter the lives of millions and dictate the use of billions in public funding, often without a shred of evidence to support them. To break out of that cycle, we need the field of criminology. It's an interdisciplinary science, borrowing from sociology, psychology, and economics, designed to study 3 distinct things: how we make laws, how people break them, and how society reacts. If we actually want to solve crime, we have to stop trusting our gut. We have to build the discipline to systematically analyze what a crime actually is and how it gets measured. Before we can measure crime, we have to agree on what it is. The strict legal definition requires 2 things to happen at once: an actus reus, or guilty act, and a mens rea, a guilty mind. Accidentally stepping on someone's foot is harmless clumsiness. Stomping on it on purpose triggers state punishment. But who decides what gets criminalized in the first place? One way to look at it is through the consensus perspective. This theory argues that some acts, like murder or assault, are outlawed because almost everyone in a society agrees they are inherently wrong. Criminologists call these mala in se offenses, and they look similar across every culture on Earth. The conflict perspective offers a very different lens. It argues that society isn't a unified group with shared values, but a collection of factions fighting for resources. In this view, laws simply reflect the interests of whoever holds political and economic power, criminalizing acts just because they say so, offenses known as mala prohibita. When you apply this conflict lens, the legal code reveals deep systemic inconsistencies. Harmful behaviors commonly associated with marginalized groups, like selling drugs on the street, are heavily punished. Meanwhile, comparable harms committed by powerful actors, like corporate pollution or predatory lending, often stay completely legal, or at worst draw a regulatory fine. The definition of crime remains a shifting boundary line, drawn by lawmakers to dictate whose harmful behavior triggers punishment and whose is allowed to persist. Once we define the boundary, we have to count the offenses. In a country of more than 330 million people, the government relies heavily on systems like the Uniform Crime Reporting Program, or UCR, which tallies up the offenses reported to local police. There's a fatal flaw in relying entirely on police data. It only captures what citizens are willing to call in and what officers actually decide to write down. If a victim doesn't trust the police, the crime officially never happened. To fix this blind spot, researchers use the National Crime Victimization Survey, or NCVS. Instead of asking local precincts for their records, this survey asks a massive sample of households directly about crimes they've experienced, completely bypassing the police station. This diagram illustrates what that survey uncovers. The visible tip above the water represents the reported crime found in police records. But beneath the surface is a massive hidden block of unreported offenses. Criminologists call this the dark figure of crime, the true scope of lawbreaking that official data completely misses. To make sense of this data, we have to adjust the math. You can't compare the raw count of 500 burglaries in a massive city to 500 burglaries in a small town. We standardize the data into a rate, calculating crimes per 100,000 people, so we can actually compare the risk level fairly across different populations. You also have to watch out for false correlations. This visual shows 2 trend lines rising together, say ice cream sales and violent incidents during the summer. But a matching pair of lines doesn't prove causation. Heat and daily routines link them. The ice cream isn't causing the violence. Without these analytical habits, statistics are easily weaponized by politicians and the media to confirm a viewer's worst fears, rather than reveal the actual state of the world. All this data and theory eventually collides with the physical world. Criminology studies the crime itself, but the criminal justice system is how our society actually responds to it. This animation shows the criminal justice funnel. Millions of crimes are committed at the top, but at every subsequent stage, reporting, investigation, arrest, prosecution, conviction, cases drop out. At the bottom, only a tiny sliver of original offenses results in incarceration. The absolute gateway to that funnel is the police. Officers hold enormous everyday power, known as discretion. In simple moments on the street, deciding whether to make an arrest or issue a warning, they alone dictate who enters the system and whose data gets recorded. Once inside the funnel, cases are pulled between competing ideologies. The crime control model prioritizes extreme efficiency, swift punishment, and protecting society at all costs. It leans comfortably into broad authority and heavily fortified institutions to lock people up. Pushing back against that is the due process model. This ideology intentionally slows the system down. It relies on complex, adversarial court procedures to prioritize individual rights, mandate fairness, and guard against the tragedy of wrongful conviction. Ultimately, studying criminology means studying ethics. By demanding accurate data, questioning whose actions get defined as illegal, and understanding how power moves through the system, we can protect ourselves from blind panic. With these habits, we gain the tools to actually build a criminal